God as a being that gives us what we want when we want it. A God that fulfills our greatest desires and hopes in the world. But when reversals of fortune occur in our lives, we're challenged once again to re-examine our expectations of who God is. Peterson writes, when a catastrophe occurs, does it work to reform our lives to who God actually is, and not the way we imagine God to be? Does it move us from thinking that we deserve God's favor as a right, to recognizing that it's a gift? Just like the community in Jeremiah's time, we are confronted over and over again by the delusion that prosperity is a God-given right. It's a delusion. And we're also confronted with the delusion that worship in the temple and the church is only about being seen and heard for our commitment to faith. What Jeremiah preached about wasn't that God gives us what we want when we want it, but that God remains faithful. He writes, I will make a new covenant. It won't be like the one I made with their ancestors when I took them out of the land of Egypt, but this is the covenant that I will make. I will put my law within them, and I will write it on their hearts. And I will be their God, and they will be my people. This is a renewed covenant, and it's different from anything that we've heard up until this point. And it's a big deal, because it moves the focus from external obedience of the law to internal motivation, from the head to the heart. For the people of Judah and for us today, it's about integrity, compassion, loving your neighbor as yourself, and doing the right thing for the right reason. Brian McLaren, pastor and leader in the emerging church, likens it to recovery. He writes, when an addict goes into recovery, he doesn't want to go back and recover the high he had before, or even to recover the conditions he had before. Instead, he wants to move forward to a new way of life, a wiser way of life, a way of life that is healing in the world. I think it's a pretty good analogy for our country today. For many of us, especially those that have lost jobs, or homes, or savings, hitting rock bottom isn't something that's going to happen somewhere down the road, maybe. It's a reality. And I imagine for everyone here, there's got to be feelings of anger over the greed and scandals and decisions that have brought us to this point. This is a path that can lead to relational and spiritual rock bottoms in our lives. When we talk about recovery, we don't need to do so only in terms of jobs or stock market figures. We should also be talking about recovery in terms of character and community. This is time that we can be using to re-examine our lives and recenter ourselves in God's renewed covenant that is given so freely. And it's a time where we can begin to celebrate God's favor as a gift. If we're willing to dare and move in this direction, then I think there is real hope for us individually and as a country. Because it's then that we recommit ourselves to a healing way of life. One that entails serving each other in love. Doing what is right for the right reason. Sacrificing for our brothers and sisters. Earlier today, we commissioned new Stephen ministers. And I can't think of a better example of what recovery can look like. Stephen ministers don't serve for money, they don't serve for fame, but instead they give of themselves freely and do so as a healing way of life. They're here to care for those who are hurting. They're here to build up the body of Christ. And they do this wonderful ministry as a way of understanding what God meant by saying, I will put my law within them and I will write it on their hearts. Exploring what God's promise of renewed covenant means for our lives is an important task, especially now. No matter how dark it gets, no matter how dismal things may seem, economically, politically, spiritually, we must remember that our God is a faithful God. And God's law is written on our hearts so that we may be a ray of light to the world. Though the road of recovery is never an easy one, it is always worth it. I will put my law within them, and I will write it on their hearts, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people. Words to live by. Words to celebrate. Amen. They